Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, and this is your host Rakesh, and here I am with another video on ReactJS series. And today I will be covering Fetch API integration with ReactJS. Before you even go there, like what is Fetch API? So Fetch API is one global method available for you to use on your browser. So where you can call the APIs through the network, right? So when I say it is available, right, so that's when you can use to interact with your backend, or you can say the provider API, right? So in example, like if you have a weather API provided by some weather forecast company, right, you wanted to use that in your application, so you will request their API and get the data. Similarly, how your Swiggy and Ola or all these people, right, they use Map API from Google, right? So they hit their Google Map API and get the data. That's how they will navigate, and they will tell you how to go, where to go, or whatever it is. Similarly, we will also get the data from another server, okay, and integrate that in our React.js application. So let's come back to the demo. So let me create a folder, Fetch API. Okay, so in that I'll create one more component called Fetch API. Okay, .jsx. Okay, calling API, and I will import that in our app.js. Fetch API. So in order to call any API, you need a API. Okay, as we are just doing the React demonstration, so there are some providers, okay, online, which like JSON placeholder, right? This is one of them, who provide the dummy data to you so that you can integrate or do some kind of test or POCs, right? So you can go to placeholders, JSON placeholder. So if you scroll down, you know, like we have couple of APIs available, like post API, like basically comments API. So post is like how you post your blog or something, right? And comments API, you wanted to integrate comments. So this will provide you some dummy data. So we will go with this post API, right? So let me go to this post. So this is get API, okay, and there are 3-4 type of API, if you know, right, methods, right? We have get, post, put, delete, all of that, right? This is our post API we can integrate with our application. So let's first copy this get API, okay, and try to integrate with our application. Before even integrating here, if you have not watched my previous video on the useEffect, please do watch. So here we going to use the useEffect hook, and why we are using it, because we wanted to call this API once when our component will mount. Okay, so if you see here, we are doing component did mount, and because we are passing this empty array, dependency array. So if I just paste this here and go back and see my application, so what you see, we have some data available, right? If you come to the network tab, you will notice there is one call happened, get call to the JSON placeholder backend gateway, right? So if you pass a post ID 1, you receive the data based on that post ID, this ID basically, right? Okay, so now as you can fetch this data through the network using the Fetch API, you can also do the console. But how can we use this data in our component? So I have also told you about use state. So what we have to do here is, in our component we need to create one state, so that we can use this data, and whenever this data will change, we should be able to re-render our application. Okay, use state, and I'll just keep one empty object here. Okay, and what I do here is, I'll just say post data. Okay, so we have this state available. So now whenever we call this API, we'll set this data, okay, and update our state. Okay, so this data which we are consoling previously, we will set to this particular state, so that this data will be available on this post data variable, right? So now, to make it simplify, what I will do, I will create one div, and in that I'll just paste this. So if I paste this, it will be in JSON format. So let me do JSON.stringify, so that we can see that data at once. right? So now if you go back, you will see this data, right now you see this data, which we are calling through the network. Okay, great. I think we are good till here. So what can be our next thing? So what generally you do in your application? So you won't do like just call once, like this is post data, right? So what you will do based on specific ID, you will call more data. Let's say you have 10 posts listed down there, right? So what will you do? If you click on one post, you will get the detail of that post, right? So basically you pass that post ID and get the detail data of it, and then show that blog post, right? So let's go back. Let's do something so that we can get this data on request. Okay, let me introduce one input box here. So basically on change, so whenever you do any kind of change, right, handle change. So on handle change, basically you need to pass that ID. So as we are doing this, right, so what we are doing here is we have this input box. Okay, so whenever we pass the ID 1 or 2 or 3, based on this ID change, right, we will fetch the data. As we have this on change method available already, so let me fetch that data and set it to one of the state. So let me define one more state which have this post ID use state, and you will have an initial value of this is 1. So because you see the we are calling post ID 1 data, right? So this post ID. So let's update this post ID here, set post ID, and what we will set here, e dot target dot value. So basically whenever we change this, so whenever we change the value here, like 1 to 2 or 2 to 3, this will update this particular state. And whenever this post ID, whenever this state will update, right, so you will update the value of post ID. It will not be 1. So if you pass 2, it will become 2. Okay, so if you want, we can see that. So what we can do here is just to see that, so we can just put this post ID here. So it is 1 by default. If you change to 2, 3, 4, like we are getting this dynamically now. Okay, so next job is, if you have watched the previous video, right, so next job is to pass this post ID as dependency here, so that whenever this post ID change, right, we should be able to fetch the new data, or you can say we should be able to fetch the data based on the dynamic ID we are passing. Okay, so that means we should form the URL such a way so that this post ID will go with your URL. Okay, so let's do that. So there are multiple ways to do the concatenation. So one way is like you will remove from end, do plus and give this. So this will also do your job, but generally we do not recommend this to you. So what you can do is you can use this template string. So now here you can just define this and put. So now it will what it will do, it will connect, or basically it will merge that post ID with your URL, and you always have a dynamic value of it. So now as you are passing this dynamic URL which you have just created here, okay, so this fetch API will fetch data for you based on your ID. Let's see how. Now see, now everything is connected. If you notice one thing, everything is connected dynamically. Your post ID is dynamically connected. You will fetch your data dynamically based on your IDs, and if there is any data change on post, you will be able to show the new data on your component, right? Because it is because React will take care about that. You don't need to worry about anything. Okay, so let me refresh everything. You see here we have user ID 1, right, 1 data. Now if you change to 2, you'll get the post ID 2, right, and you have this title and body available, and similarly it is doing the console. Change to 3, right, and you'll get this 3 ID. So what is happening when you change back to 0? So it is fetching something called almost 10 records, right, or 100 records. Yeah, so they might have set on their API. So if you do not pass anything, if you just remove this part, so it will automatically fetch the 100 records for you. Okay, so it's fetching the 100 records. And if you wanted to get the specific ID, right, so then you can pass this ID here. Okay, great. I think you understood now how we call the API, get API. So this is very basic, like you have just called one get API, but so in your application, right, so you may not have only get API, so you definitely have a post APIs, you definitely have your delete APIs or put APIs. Okay, so basically all the operations you can perform, right? So now every time you will not do like fetch this, that, or all of that. So what you can do is you can create one common method. Okay, so which will take care about your different methods also if you are passing any kind of data to your APIs. So what does that mean? So this get API is pretty much simple, right? If you even call in browser, you will be able to call, right? You got this here. If you have a post API, so you need to pass this method, you need to pass this body params, then you have some header. So to do this thing, right, you can also directly copy this, call in your application directly, but what happens, a lot of redundant data will be there, like this JSON.response you see here, right? So this is pretty much common in all the APIs, right? So you don't want to do that conversion again and again, right? So what we can do, we can create one common component, or you can say common method, which will handle all of this, right? Okay, so this API method which I'm creating to help you organize your fetch, right? So what can be your parameters? So you will be passing URL dynamically and method directly, and then basically that body parameters, right, which you're going to send to your server, right? This you want to send dynamic, right? In one API you will be doing something, in one API you will be doing something. So you can say options. So now you have these three things coming in here. So first thing, you prepare your body dynamically, because you will be getting these options, and this body which you want to be dynamic, right? Definitely, like in get you will not be doing, you will not be sending any kind of body. In post you will be definitely sending, in delete you will be definitely sending. So this body part should be dynamic. So if you get the options, right, so one thing you can do here is, if it is not coming, you can set by default to null. Okay, if you have an option, you prepare that body colon, okay, that object which we going to pass, right? So the object which we going to pass, this whole thing I'm preparing here. So now body colon JSON dot stringify. So whenever you pass any body parameters, right, to the server, definitely you need to send in string format. Okay, so now these options you will pass here, so that it will convert to string. Okay, and if you do not have this option, okay, you can set it to null. Okay, null or empty object, it's up to you. Okay, great. So we have this body, so let's copy this whole thing. Okay, you can do one way, like you can either use this way, right? Otherwise you can also use what you say, async await, which is ES6 feature. So let's use ES6 feature. So one thing, if you do any kind of API call, or you writing a big business logic, right, so you should always use try catch. So try catch will always help you. Okay, will always help you to know where is the error exactly in your code, if you get into any kind of error, right? Okay, okay, so if you get any error, it will fall under this particular situation. Okay, otherwise you will execute your code. So here what we can do is, so we'll say const response, okay, await, and we can say that fetch. Okay, we'll say this fetch which accept URL, right? The URL which we are receiving as a parameter we are passing here. So this part I am talking about, right? And then if you have any kind of options, so we'll be keeping here, right? These are the options in bracket, in this curly braces, right? So what we will do is, we'll quickly paste this everything and then change it accordingly. Like this method we need to pass dynamically, so we'll replace with this static one, right? So body is something which you need to take care. So what I will do is, I will just use spread operator, okay, and then use it, because if we have something, then it automatically insert, otherwise not, right? So it will automatically take care of that part. This header is always common, right? Let's keep this here, because so you mostly deal with the JSON type of object. If even you are changing this content type, then definitely you can also involve one more parameter here if you want, otherwise it's okay. So one thing we are missing, if you are using await, you need to use async here. Okay, so if you use async, then this function know, okay, this is a async function, and we are waiting for we will await for any kind of execution, right? So once you have response, right, so if you have seen this structure here, what they are doing, they are getting the data in next promise, it is returning response.json. so it will do same job here again, even if you are doing ES6. So what you can do is you can again have this final data, okay, and then you can say await. So basically here you do dot then, right? So it's basically dot then and dot then. So instead you can also do this way, await, okay, your response dot json, right? And now you have this final data available which you can return. Okay, so now you are returning some data here. So now we have created this API method which is available to use. So let's remove this previous okay, let's do one thing, let's keep this URL itself and remove everything else. Okay, so let me create one URL variable and keep this here, because we anyway required this, right? So now what we can do, so let me create one method, right? So generally this is the way you should basically call your async methods, right? When you use async await, so you should, in useEffect, you should do this way. So get post data. Okay, I'll create this method. So get post data. In useEffect, right, if you are using this type of implementation where we have async await, so it's highly recommended you create one function in it, like get post data, okay, and then you call this API, like which is here. So you will call this here, you say data equals, so API, so you'll pass this URL here, okay, and then you will say method. If you want, you say method, otherwise it, like even here, right, if you don't have this, you can by default set to get, otherwise you need to always set, right? So you can keep the get by default here, then you no need to pass this, basically, because it is a get API, right? You no need to worry about all of that. Even options, if you are not passing, it is null. So now you need to use await and here you need to use async. Okay, so now what is happening here, you are passing, you're still doing the same thing, but you have reduced your code and you have abstract everything out, and you have created a common component to do that job. So now anywhere you wanted to use for post or get, you can use this way. So now this data, once this data is available, right, so you can set this post data to data. Until now we have not executed this particular method, right? So we can just execute this. Okay, so what we are doing, whenever post is changing, right, whenever post is changing, we are calling this useEffect, right? And this useEffect is having a method which is executing here, and which actually call that API common method, and we pass that URL, and we set that data to our state, and whenever state data will set, we will have updated values here. Okay, go back and see our application. Okay, let me clean this up. Okay, so we have this first API data available. If you monitor the network, if I changed to, so you're still able to get the data from your JSON placeholder API, right? Great. So clear, right? So now what is next? If you wanted to set the data, if you wanted to do the post, so now this method is very much useful now. So what we can do, so let me create one more useEffect hook which will take care of our post. So I just wanted to show you how this API works for post method type APIs, right? So this one, basically I'm talking about this API. Okay, if this kind of API you wanted to call, then how you can use or reuse this method. Let's come back to our new use effect. So this one you have to do again like similar way, like a post data. So you will create a function post data. Okay, so you will execute this post data. Similarly, you need this URL. Okay, or you can copy this URL from here if you want. Anything would work. Basically, you can just say const URL, because this will not gonna change, right? So you notice one thing, this portion is always common, right? You can also evolve your method. So what you can do is you can copy this method, and here you can evolve this. How? So you can create one const final URL, you pass this, okay, and then you can just pass this URL here. So what happens, you don't need to call this every time, like you don't need to add this thing on every API URL. Okay, so what you can do, you can get rid of this part here. Okay, remove this and remove even this. So now it can be your post, or it can be your comments, or whatever it is. The initial portion will remain same, right? Okay, great. So we are good till here. Okay, so we have this URL called post. And what else we required? We need a method post. So let's call this const data equals await API. Okay, we are calling this API. So if we are using await, async we need to use. Okay, so now first thing is URL, second thing is method. So you can say post, third is options, right? So options, so what you can do, create a options here, like you can say options, okay. So you have some data. So you are doing stringify here, so you no need to worry about that. Like you don't need to worry about passing it stringified way. So you can just copy this part and keep it here statically. We can always pass this dynamically, as I already told you, create your state and do pass this data dynamically. Okay, right now these options you are already passing, so you can just set to like Rakesh, can set to body, this is your dummy post. Okay, and user ID you will set to 10. Okay, and you pass this here. Now as and when you receive this, right, so you can say I wanted to see this data. So again, like because we want re-rendering, right? So const post API. We cannot say that, like let's see that. I'll just create something called text and set text. Okay, use state. So I'll just do that, and what I will do is I will just do this, like use test and data, so that I just wanted to see whatever I have posted, right? So I just wanted to see whatever I have posted, I am getting that back. Okay, text. So here I will say h3, I'll say this is post API data. So now we are pretty much sorted, right? So if you're able to notice what we have done, we are calling the same method which we have created previously, and what we are doing, we are passing the URL, the method, and the options, right? So which carry some information. This can be dynamic, we can do it, right? So now we are setting to that state. Whenever this will change, here you will receive the data. So let me convert to JSON stringify, so that it would be easier, because it will come as an object, right? Okay, great. So now save, go back and reload our application. Okay, because we are getting the data because it is on mount, right? so component did mount. So now this is post API data where you have a Rakesh title. If you see the network, you have called one API which is post and method is post, and our payload, basic payload is something which we are sending here in options. Okay, we're sending as options, right? And this is what we are sending to server, and server is receiving this data. It update into database. It says user ID, for user ID 10, right? Update this body and this thing, right? And you will receive back that data. Okay, you have a latest ID created. Okay, after 100 it is 101, because by default you have seen, right? If you call post API, right, so you'll receive the data from 0 to 100. Amazing. So I think pretty much sorted, right? So also I told you how to create this common method so that you can reuse. Now if you wanted to use this in all your component, so you can take out this. Okay, take out this and you can keep it somewhere like utils. Okay, you create something called utils, and here you can keep that like api.js and paste that. Now you have this API, right? So you can export this, export default API. Okay, so you have this API returned from here. Now because you are using it here, you need to import. So one way you can just try to write, and then automatically you will get it. So you will just say, and you say API, right? Not this API, second one. Okay, when you call this, it will automatically fetch and import for you, right? So now you are importing this API and using it multiple places. Now you can also use in any of other component, like here you can use, because you are exporting it. Basically you are making this util available for all other components, right? So likewise you create your utils. Okay, if you have some kind of calculator, let's say your percentage calculator, or let's say your weather calculator, or whatever it is, so you can keep inside the utils. Okay, so go back, see, we still running, we still able to get the data and post the data. So thank you so much guys. I think now you know how to use fetch API in React.js and how to integrate or create the common methods inside React.js and reuse it multiple places. So in next video I'll be covering how we can use XCOs in React.js to do all of our advanced level API calls, right? Okay, stay tuned guys, and thank you so much for watching, and please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Bye.